And hello again, and here we are back in my garage, which is now looking a lot tidier and a lot emptier than it did last week, because of course I've now moved an awful lot of gear from here into my new storage unit. And the reason for that, of course, was twofold. First of all, so I can have more space to work on my bikes, and secondly, so I've got room to bring in my new bike. Now it should be here by now, but it's not, and that's because there's been delays caused by the DVLA issuing new registration numbers, so I'm still waiting. I'm not too concerned about that because the weather this week's been awful, so I probably wouldn't have been out riding it in any case. So yeah, I'm still waiting, but I've got a spot for it right here. Right, so let's talk about my new motorbike. In part one I did ask you guys, what bike do you think I bought? And quite a few people actually got it right. But before I tell you what the bike is, I want to go back in time, because this purchase has been very much sort of heart over head. I've been interested in this bike for a long time, and yeah, and it's a sort of name, a brand that I've had an interest in since I was a little kid. So we're going to go back a long time, about 56, 57 years, when I was about 5 years old. So it's a little tale. And I still remember this moment after all this time. One of the earliest moments I can remember concerns this bike, which is kind of strange, because at the time I didn't know anything about motorbikes, had no knowledge of them, and yet this memory is still tucked away inside my head. And that memory is that one Saturday morning, I'm being dragged along to town by my mum on the bus, usual story, bored out my mind, going shopping. We walk into town, into the town square, and for once there's something different going on, there's something new. Oh, that's interesting, I'm only 5 years old, so anything new is great. And what it was a police exhibition. They were handing out leaflets and chatting to people, and that's all very interesting. And they had a panda car, they had some sort of police pursuit car. I think looking back it was probably either a Rover P5 or Rover P6, because this would have been back in the late 60s. And that's interesting, but what caught my eye at the end of the line was something different. And what it was a motorbike, a police motorbike, all white. Now, as I say, at the time I knew nothing about motorbikes, but this somehow caught my attention. It had a big fairing on it, it had boxes on the side, and best of all, it had a telephone on the back behind the seat, which I thought was amazing. It also had aerials sticking out of it, so for me it looked like something from Thunderbirds. You know, it looks really amazing. And to this day, I remember that moment. What I also remember is, I was only 5 years old, and my eye line was in line with the side panels. That's how small I was. And I was just learning to read and write, so I managed to read what it said on the side panel. And I sort of read it, I thought, oh, I've heard of that word before, I know what that means. It's something to do with soldiers and war and guns and Tommy guns and bombs and planes. It's all really cool. So yeah, that's a moment I remember. Now you go forward about 15 years, and I was a poor student with my first little 250 on L plates in Manchester, and I couldn't really afford the petrol to go back into to university. It was only 2 miles anyway, so I used to walk there and back every day, no doubt in the rain in Manchester. But I did wear my leather jacket just to show I've got a motorbike. And turns out somebody further down the lane where I lived had a bike. And when he used to see me, and when he used to go to work in the morning, he used to see me, I guess, and think, oh, there's a young biker. And he used to open up the bike as he whizzed past me and opened it up. And it did sound very nice. Never talked to the guy, never met him, but I remember that moment. And that bike was one of these bikes, great big black and gold thing, and it did sound really nice. So go forward to 2010, and this brand was reinvigorated, was brought back to the UK. Manufacturing started again with the new bikes, and all was well. Except it wasn't, because they didn't do very well. And I do know a little bit about manufacturing, and I did look at the Donington site, and basically it was an old office building that for some reason they'd started building bikes in, which is a really stupid thing to do, because manufacturing doesn't take place in office buildings with carpets on the floor. But anyway, whatever. I then got to meet the new top man. And then at some point later on, I think it might have been at the NEC bike show, I actually spoke to, very briefly, I spoke to the new owner, you know, the MD of the place, and my sort of spider tingles were tingling, saying, I wouldn't trust this guy as far as I could throw him. He seemed really dodgy. Don't know why, but I just felt, no, you don't know much about bikes. You're just some sort of business person or dodgy guy. Turns out I was right, because a few years later the company went bust, and turns out this top guy had stolen £10 million from the pension fund of their employees. He should be in jail for that, but he got 2 years, I think. But he didn't go to jail, it was suspended, so that's pretty bad news. Anyway, go forward a year or two, we then found out that the brand had been bought by another big company, this time an Indian company called, I think it's TVS. And who the hell are they? Never heard of them. So the thought was, I thought that, well, what they'll do is they'll go back to India and slap a Norton badge, because yes, it's a Norton. They'll slap a Norton badge on a little 125 or 300 bike, an Indian built bike, and try and ship it over to Europe, to the West, with a big profit margin, and there you go, which is not what we want to see for Norton. But it turns out, no, they didn't. What they've done is they've spent £100 million on a new factory, a new investment in Solihull in Birmingham, and started remaking the bike. But they've remade it with a lot of improvements, so all the little niggles that this low volume bike had in the last 10 years have now hopefully been resolved. So if you're all wondering what I'm talking about, of course, the bike I bought is a Norton Commando 961. So I saw the bike advertised, I saw a demo model advertised at a good price at a place not too far away from me in Northwich. Went over there on a rainy day, as I already mentioned, liked what I saw. Turned out for £500 more I could buy a brand new one, because even though officially these bikes are something like £16,500–17,000, they're not really, because the dealer offers a contribution of over £2,000. It's actually 2,024 quid. So no doubt if I wait until New Year, it'll be 2,025 quid, which brought the price down just over 15 grand, with a free first service and that kind of stuff. So that's what I've bought. So while I was there, I got a choice. I could either buy a black one or a silver one. I could either buy a Cafe Racer or the standard SP with standard bars. And while a Cafe Racer looks far better to me, I thought, well, let's be sensible. You're not getting any younger. Let's buy the bike with the higher bars. What also tipped my choice was that it turns out, even though the Cafe Racer is identical to the SP, apart from the clip-ons, it's £500 more. Why, I have no idea, but they charge you £500 more. So no, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I bought myself a Norton Commando 961. So I've gone into it wide eyes open. I know there could be issues. It's a small volume manufacturer. Originally they said they'd build 200 SPs and 200 CRs, and the chassis number of my bike is in the low 300s. But that said, they've really only got going this year, so I know it is looking okay. They've since launched some of the bikes. They're basically just different finishes, different colours of the same bike, and they're saying they'll make, say, 100 of them and 50 of them and 100 of them. So the numbers are starting to build up. So I think by the time they phase this bike out, when they replace it with a brand new range, which they're currently working on, that they may well have made 1,000 bikes, which is plenty, because that gives you the volume to make it worthwhile for people to make spare parts and so on. So what else can I tell you about the bike? Well, I did take a little bit of a film with my camera while I was there, and I got a choice actually of two bikes, because each one's a little bit different. They're all handmade. So I spent a long time looking at both bikes, all the same, and I couldn't see any difference. So I said, right, I'll have that one, the one on the plinth. So I'll just show you this little bit of film I made. The dealer I went to is called Oakmere Motors. They sell both Toyotas and Mazdas, but they also sell a lot of cool cars. They sell Caterhams and Lotuses, Morgans, as well as some old classic cars. They had an E-Type Jag there, a beautiful E-Type Jag, 100 grand it was though, but it was nice to look at least. And of course, the Nortons are in the one corner. Oh, and they also sell CCM as well, the CCM bikes built in Britain. So yeah, it's quite a cool place. Tom, the sales assistant, was really helpful, So yeah, I'm pretty happy with my purchase. Anyway, I'm going on and on. So here's a quick clip of the bikes that I saw when I went to Oakmere. And so that's what I saw when I first went to see the bikes. And I must say, I was very impressed with the build quality. Now, since then, I have read an awful lot of reviews online. There's lots of V-bloggers, you know, doing reviews of the bikes, lots of comments, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people say, oh, it's not that powerful. It's only 77 brake horsepower. And it's quite heavy at 230 kilograms, which is true. If you compare it to, say, a Thruxton R, which is about 110, 112 brake, yeah, it is not that quick, but that's okay because it's a road bike and all the power is made low down and in the mid-range, which is where you want it on a road bike, at least for me anyway. Or maybe I'm just getting old and, you know, the older I get, the faster I was, blah, blah, blah. But one thing I would say is they've been a bit unfair when it comes to the weight of the bike, because Norton give the weight at 230 kilograms wet with a full tank of petrol, and nobody else does that. I'm surprised they do it actually. So if you compare the weight with all the other bikes, they're all weighed dry with no petrol in the tank, no oil in the engine, no battery acid in the battery, not even any brake line fluid. So if you take off that weight, it'll bring the weight down from, say, 230 to about 210, I reckon anyway. So yeah, that's a much more comparable weight for the bike. And so those of you who guess right that I'm getting a Norton Commando, well done. Quite an easy choice actually, because I guess there aren't many bikes which come with a full rolling suspension, sort of bikes that I would be into, you know, older style bikes. Now, I could have bought pretty much any bike out there. The cost wasn't really an issue. I've got enough money put away so that, you know, I can buy anything I want. And the good news about being old is your insurance is really cheap. I've got a quote, fully comp, for that new bike. I think it's with Bikesure, Adrian Flux, £230 annually. That's fully comp. That's not bad, is it? So yeah, I do feel sorry for young people now because they're paying thousands of pounds for like 125s to put them on the road, but that's insurance for you. It's always been expensive when you're young and cheaper when you're old. So where was I? Oh yes. So when it comes to the bike, why did I choose a Norton Commando? Yes, there's that sort of history of me remembering the side panel on a bike when I was 5 years old and all that kind of stuff. But I also wanted to buy, if possible anyway, a British built bike. You know, I've worked in manufacturing all my life, so it's nice to support a British company, even though they are owned by an Indian conglomerate, which, by the way, I believe are the 4th largest bike manufacturer in the world, even though we've never heard of them, because they mainly make small bikes for the home market in India and nearby. So hopefully, with a £4 billion turnover, they're not going to support Norton for a long term and not bail out when things get tough. Now, Norton recently announced the annual report about a week ago, and they've lost 37 million quid in the last financial year. And people are commenting about that, oh, they're going to go bust, blah, blah, blah. But they're not, because what they are is essentially a startup. They're a startup company. They've got all that forward investment to design and build a new range of bikes, which won't be cheap. That's at least 100 million. They've got to pay for a new factory, blah, blah, blah. I've also found out that apparently, based on their published results, Norton are losing about £5,000 on each Commando 961 they sell. Yeah, it's amazing. And and that's not too far off, I think, because if you look at the bike, look at the cost, even the wholesale cost of the wheels, the Brembo brakes, the all-in suspension, that beautiful paint job. They've got to, pay for all that. The labour building it. Yeah, I mean, 15 grand is a lot of money, but when it's hand-built like that, maybe it should really be 20 grand. But of course, if it was, there won't be many people buying such a bike. But anyway, I won't mention the V4s, because they're just ridiculously priced. They're like, what are they, 45 grand? I did actually see one. I've seen one at the dealers, and it was there because it's going back to Norton to get a one-off paint job. Okay, that's nice, it's a nice paint job already. Now, I was somewhat taken aback when the guy said to me, oh yeah, this guy wants a new paint job on his bike. He's not ridden it, but he wants a new paint job. It's going to cost him £11,000 for a new paint job on his existing bike. It's like, God, I've got a mate here who do a really nice job for a grand. I couldn't believe it, 11 grand for a paint job, but there you go. And I have noticed that Norton have just recently come out with a one-of-one scheme where you can pick any colour you want and get it painted by the factory when you buy a new bike. But apparently it is super expensive. It's actually quite a shame, because if I had a choice of more than black and silver, I probably would have gone for a nice pleasant red, a bit like the red here on my Kawasaki, because I do like that colour. And they did make a bike, a Commando, you know, a few years ago in that colour. So, but no, to only do black and silver. Now, another thing is, the bike comes with a 2-year warranty, so I ain't going to be changing it within those 2 years. I've got plans that I might tweak it a bit. The one part I've bought so far for the bike actually is a pair of bobbins, a pair of swing arm bobbins, so I can use a paddock stand on the bike, and that's about it. And that's probably about as far as I can do. I was offered, by the way, something called a carbon pack by the dealer, because he said, oh, we've got 6 in, they're normally £1,500, but to you, because we've got 6 of them in, £1,000. I said, okay, well, what's that consist of? He said, oh, you get a carbon fibre hugger for the back, you get a carbon fibre chain guard, okay, you get some carbon fibre covers hidden everywhere, and you get a little screen, a little fly screen, which is carbon fibre. I said, nah, the fly screen's nice, but I'm not paying £1,000 for those things, you know. Actually, they're no lighter than plastic anyway, and ABS, so it's not, and this bike isn't the sort of bike you want to cover in carbon fibre, at least I don't think so. Yeah, so that's the sort of buying experience. It should be here soon, but there's a spot for it, it's just not here yet. Yeah, so it's been quite an interesting time looking at all the different bikes, all the different options I've got out there. Could have bought a H2, could have bought a BMW RRRR, R90T, but I won't ever buy a BMW ever again because of the treatment I got in the past from a dealer. Yeah, I could have got a Kawasaki Z900 RS Cafe, which is still a nice bike. And in fact, I've got some Cafe parts on this bike here. It's got it's got a carbon fairing on it, so yeah, I do like the look. But what tipped me over the edge to buy the Norton, it's not just the history that I have with the bike, it's also that it's so well made. Honestly, I spent half an hour staring at it, hands and knees, staring at it, just trying to go through everything, looking under the tank and all that kind of stuff, and I couldn't find fault with it. I mean, how many bikes out there come with Öhlins suspension back and front, not the very toppest end Brembos, but pretty damn good Brembos, a big air-cooled motor, which, by the way, has push rods, surprisingly enough. I guess that's why it looks so good, because it doesn't need to have cams which are big and heavy. One good thing though about having push rods is it's got hydraulic lifters like a Harley. What that means is you never have to worry about setting the valve clearances. There's no shims to worry about, no annual checks. It just runs forever and you're good. It does mean that you can't rev it. It doesn't rev too high. You know, maybe I think it revs to about 7.5, 8,000 revs, because push rods don't like going up and down too fast. But that's okay. That's plenty. You know, 8,000 revs is enough for me. I have been investigating with people options for making it a bit quicker though. Not by revving it more, but by making it more efficient and perhaps even increasing the engine size, because a few people now are doing that. But as I say, I won't do any of that until the 2-year warranty is up, at which point perhaps I'll part exchange it for something else. I might keep it standard, who knows, but I'm going to resist the temptation to mess with it during those 2 years when it's under warranty. Right, so that's enough of me rabbiting on about this bloody bike. Yeah, things are going okay in here. I've got a space for the bike, I've got locks all ready to go. Yeah, I might actually fit a tracker to the bike. I'm a bit concerned about the battery drainage on a tracker, but maybe it's the best idea. That might bring the insurance down even more. Although this bike is not a to B bike. This bike is an A to A bike. It's a bike I'll use, go for a ride and come back home. It's not a bike I'm going to leave out, you know, in a car park in the middle of nowhere or in a busy street. No, I won't do that with my other bikes, my expensive bikes, because you don't know what the hell's going to happen to them. Not so much that they get stolen, which could happen, but I come back to my Harley occasionally and there's been little kids sitting on it. The parents are trying to take a photograph of them, and I've had one bike where some kid put his feet on the pannier tops and scratched the hell out of the paintwork, and the parents are like, yeah, well, whatever, it's only a bike, innit? It's like, no mate, this is an £11,000 motorbike and you just bloody scratched it. So I won't be doing that, and so I'll now make part 3 when I actually get the bike here and I'll do some miles on it. I've got to do 500 miles before the first service, at which point I can then start to rev it a bit more. But being a bigger air-cooled motor, I suspect it'll need at least 1,500, 2,000 miles for it to really loosen up and run as it should. But hopefully I can get that done this year before the cold weather comes along and they put the grit and salt on the roads, because at that point all my bikes come in the garage and don't get used on the road anymore. I don't like riding when it's cold and wet and horrible, and the bikes don't like it either, because the salt just kills the finish on motorbikes. So I'm old enough to not bother with that sort of thing anymore. I rode a bike and didn't have a car for nearly 15 years when I was doing like 20,000 miles a year, and at the end I was just sick of it. It was just it wasn't fun anymore. It was just a real drag. So I try to avoid getting wet and cold on motorbikes these days. But anyway, that's enough of me wittering on about my new bike, and so we'll make part 3 when we'll see the bike in detail, get it fired up, maybe do some flybys on the road. And so until then, thanks for watching and cheers.